Have you wondered what financial advisors actually think about finances? This is your sneak peek at the conversations within Financial Design Studio. Michelle Smallenberger, the CEO here, will be your host as you go behind the designs.
Well, hello and welcome to 2025. My name is Michelle and I am the host of the Behind the Designs podcast. Our goal with this podcast is to give you a glimpse of how others are using their money to live fuller lives and give more generously. Now, we're not talking about New Year's resolutions, but instead getting involved in making a difference for the things you care about. And this may be easier than you think it is. That's why today I want to welcome our guest, Marsha McClary, to the mic. Welcome, Marsha.
Hi, Michelle. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. Now, Marsha is really involved in everything from town clubs, national politics, and international nonprofits. She knows how to make a difference in her community, and we want to share how she does this in her own life. So get ready to be inspired because Marsha is someone who's actually just out there doing it. I just think of the saying, just do it. And Marsha is someone who's getting involved, which takes a lot of time and energy. So I hope that everyone's inspired from this episode today. All right, Marsha, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, kind of give us a background, kind of your career history, and then, what that's been like.
So I grew up in Illinois, and went to college and came back to this area. I have 5 kids, and I did several stints in my career. One was I started in public accounting, and then I went into corporate finance from there. Mostly in the tech industry to start. And then I went into pharmaceuticals, and I did a lot of tours of different groups within pharmaceuticals, primarily finance, but then also some more management, portfolio management, operations, things there. And then back in 2018, 2019, I was thinking about doing something different. I'd been very involved in some ministry work in terms of financial help. And then I was always the person in the pharmaceutical world at the end of my career there, where someone would come to my office and ask me questions about finance or, 401ks and things like that. So I thought, maybe this is something I want to actually do for a living at some point. So then my company had closed their offices in the Chicago area. And it was like the opportunity just sort of fell in line to start my own business that was more about financial planning. And so there it began. My firm is called the ROI of Life, and it's been very rewarding and definitely a lot of giving back as well. I've done some things again at church in terms of financial planning as well as just kind of ad hoc helping people in the business when I was in pharma. And it was a natural transition. And so that's been now about a little over 4 years I've been doing this, and it's been very exciting. And the ROI of life really came from the fact that you're not really always talking about money. Money is really a tool to achieving other things. It just gets you there. It's not actually the end all be all. And ROI, return on investment of your life. So when you look back upon what all the things you've been doing in your life, are you happy with them? And how you've been using your time, your resources, your money, all of those things. So that's the things that we focus on in my group.
Yeah, and I think back, so I think, Marsha, when we first met, it was because you were starting your business. So I think you had reached out and said, hey, can we chat? So I think that's where we initially met, which has been exciting just to kind of watch how you're involved and and hopefully just kind of like, I mean, we're both advisors, and so just like encouraging each other to keep doing a great job for our clients. Now, who do you mainly focus on?
Yeah, so some of it came really organically in terms of who I knew from my past career, or there were people from church. Some of it showed up in the terms of executive compensation, just because that was a lot of what we dealt with in terms of at my previous companies. Also, some divorce and blended family work because people know that I have that experience personally. And I done some pro bono things through the church in that area as well. So that's what showed up, and that's kind of what sticks, and then you bring the pieces together so that the client has, a full financial plan, but it usually starts from some specific need that they come to you for, and it really those two areas.
Nice. Yeah. No, that's great. So I know today we're gonna this is something we've talked a lot about is yes, professionally, you're in your careers, but what we're talking about today is really personally, what are we doing with our time, our resources, like you said, like these are tools that people have to use and something that you do really well. There's a lot of words to describe it. So I think it's, you're a cheerleader. We can even use the word influencer. I'll see you post on a lot of things really inviting people into events in the community, whether it could be anywhere from politics, elections to just local, ministry, anything. I mean, a wide variety of things. So we're going to talk about those different types of groups today because you and I have talked a lot about this of we all have so much time. And so what are we choosing to do with that? And it also just ties back to kind of the name of your firm of this return on investment, like of our life. And I think a lot of people, as they're going through different phases in life, even like moving into retirement, that can change. And what do I do with my time now? And so I hope this is encouraging for people to listen to and maybe to give them some ideas of ways that they can get involved. So thank you so much for that background. So I know that getting involved in the community is really important to you. Where kind of describe where you're currently involved and what kind of difference you're trying to make maybe in like some of those different groups.
Yeah, in terms of more locally, it's taken a couple different forums. I having five kids, I was very involved in the schools and their education, so that's an easy foray. And certainly during COVID, wanted the best for all the kids to really get back into education and recover from that experience. So that's where a lot of it came from locally, and then it kind of spurred from there because you really and you mentioned politics. So, I wasn't really involved in politics, but when you talk about trying to get the results you want in certain areas, you really don't have a choice. So, it starts out with advocacy, and then you start to find out that if the politics and laws or regulations are affecting the results, you really have to get involved. So that's in terms of locally, it is a lot of education. Sometimes I know a lot about money too, right? Just like you. So it gets into taxes, as well. I can definitely talk a lot about taxes, and, supporting candidates that I think are going to reflect the values that I have and what I would like to see happen, in terms of especially using our money, because we put, a lot of our money into taxes, especially in Illinois. So that's another area I've been very involved in.
So I love kind of that theme. What I'm hearing from you is kind of getting involved in the things that you care about. So you're really looking at it and say, hey, I really care about my kids and their education. So I want to be involved in their schools. And I think this is actually a really great example because our kids aren't in school forever. And so then, that changes. And then, okay, maybe they're still involved in things that you want to be involved in, but then it's okay, local elections or where, like you said, taxes. I want to make sure that my money that I'm paying in taxes is being used wisely. So this theme of kind of like what you care about and then saying, how do I make a difference in this? So is it kind of asking yourself, like, what do I need to do to make an impact here? Is that kind of how you would say you think about it?
Yeah, and I think, when you think people have different skills and different amounts of time, or whether it's time, money, or different experiences they can bring to the table. And for me, it was, thinking about where my skills and my experiences can be value added. And for somebody else, it might be a different area. And whether that's like, operations, or whether it's, all kinds of different things. So, again, matching your experience, your passion with the needs, and where your values play out, I think is very important. And I certainly like want to see, the world, continue to be a better place, especially in the United States. And however that, I feel I can do the best is what I
Yeah,
do.
I
So
think one of the things that's interesting too is there's definitely skills that we have as people that we can use and we can offer to different groups. I do think sometimes like the timing of when these match up really like comes together, you know. And what happens is sometimes an opportunity I think finds you. So I know you have a really cool story. We've talked kind of a little bit, you've kind of shared a little bit about like the local groups that you're involved in, but even internationally. So you are on a not-for-profit, and I'll let you kind of share a little bit about this because this is where I think sometimes an opportunity comes up, and this is the difference. You know, someone saying, I want to get involved, I want to do something maybe with the skills that I have, the time, or the resources I have. How do I do that? And so sometimes it's not necessarily you looking, but, you know, being open to opportunities that come. Can you share with us? I know you have a cool story about like getting involved in Feed My Starving Children. Why don't you kind of, you know, share that story? Because I think that's an opportunity that sometimes is like, hey, I need it here. And sometimes it pops up like that. So I'll let you share that.
yeah, it's definitely an interesting story, and it definitely sent a lot of signals that this was a place to get involved. So, we had done packing at Feed My Starving Children. It's a global organization, but there is a facility local to here where you can go, whether it's with a group or your family, kids for field trips, and pack for children across the globe. And what this really, in my observation, allows these kids to go to school and they're not hungry, and the families have this relief. And so it's huge, and this organization is phenomenal. They have better delivery rates than Amazon does. They are very highly rated charity in terms of the amount that goes to the meals as opposed to administration. So I can't be happier about that. But the way I got involved was way back was not knowing some of those things. We'd go on field trips with the kids. We've packed with friends, my kids' swim teams, and some of their organizations from school. We've done meal packing there over the years. And then when the pandemic hit in 2020, my husband does food packaging. And as you can imagine, Feed My Starving Children, because all of their meal packing was done on volunteers, that came to a screeching halt, literally zero. And he got involved in his company, and they did machine pack, and they fulfilled a very significant portion of the needs globally for Feed My Starving Children through his company for a while in 2020 and 2021. And so that was the one thing where we certainly got more involved. Um, in terms of that. And then they, in I think it was the first mention of it was 2022, they were going to have some board seats coming open in the next year or two. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. So, and then it turned out that they also had, kind of a financial need too, where, having a skill set where you could like understand audits and those kind of things is a little more of a unique skill set. So, um, I got approached for about the board, and it just made sense. It's just, giving back to kids, allowing them to have the ability to get the education because they are well fed. It kind of goes with everything I'm doing locally too. And, it's like also, I know with Feed My Starving Children, they always have a much more significant ask for meals than they're able to fulfill. So I feel like I've always worked for companies and organizations that are very growth orientated, and how do we do more and how do we grow? And I feel like I can bring that strategy to the table as well, to help them feed more kids because the demand is far greater than they can fulfill right now in terms of both fundraising and just pure logistics.
Yeah, I think that's such a cool story though, because I think a lot of people have gone there to pack meals. Like a lot of our listeners, they've, you know, been involved there some way. And so to realize that, you know, when you can't do something in person that has to be done in person, you know, for someone to step in and that to be able to continue is really cool. And it was definitely a unique ability that your husband had to be able to do that. This is something you and I have talked about how, when you're involved on a board, and I think this is kind of just something for people to think about, the skills that you have or that you've developed during your career, whether that's, through your work or through organizations or just skills that you inherently have. It's very interesting to me that you can be on a board with, let's say, five different financial people, but each of those people, they do something a little bit different. And even if they do the exact same thing, each of them have different skill sets that are needed at different times. I don't know. Have you kind of seen that? I guess this is encouragement for people who are saying, I don't really have anything to offer. You probably do. You just don't realize it until that opportunity comes. Have you kind of seen that play out in different meetings or things like that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, whether it's, being on a board or being doing presentations or involved with a board of these companies, because I used to do financial planning corporate wise, and I'd be presenting to boards all the time and, talking to them. And you know, diversity in terms of experience, I mean, it's just a lot of people have so much more in their life that they've experienced just beyond their functional skill set too. Just or if they volunteered somewhere else or, just where they live, they might have a lot of different things to bring to the table. So, but I am a firm believer that sometimes those opportunities will fall in your lap and you don't even realize that it's happening. And then you're like, okay, yeah, I can, and a lot of even my mom friends who may have worked little or not much in their career, they often have done a ton of volunteering. That is, it's just unpaid. It's just, but they have just as much experience as everybody else to bring to the table. They've done event planning or they've done, I mean, these boards, I mean, there's huge events and things they do to raise money. Or shareholder events, things that they need that skill set for at the table too. So I think everybody has something to give.
Yeah, yeah. I think something I just think too is sometimes, sometimes there may not be an organization that exists yet for the need that you have, that you see, hey, I want to make a difference in this area. And I do just want to kind of point people to, there was an episode we recorded last year that talked through like kind of how to get an organization set up or how to think about getting one started. This is something, I know, Marsha, that you really care about too, is kind of looking at an organization. So now when we kind of think about using our finances or time, if we say, okay, here's the organization I want to get involved in, or I may want to, what are some things that you think are really important for people to look at and to say, okay, yes, this is a good organization that maybe is efficient with what it's receiving?
Yeah. Depending on how big it is, um, they might be on like a charity rating, like Charity Navigator kind of thing. Usually you can look at their website, you can look at their social media and find out some things that way. Um, and assuming they're registered and doing the reporting, you can see the efficiency a lot of the times and how much is going back to the actual mission of what they're trying to do versus administration. Um, and I do have to say, like, and that's something I encourage people to look at is with their giving too. Um, if a lot of money is being spent on administration, you kind of have to wonder, is that a place you want to give your time and money? Um, but yeah, it's in volunteering wise too. I mean, sometimes you can even make a difference if you see a charity that's struggling and maybe you have the ability to help them change as long as the mission and the management seems um, you know, they seem ethical and everything to you. But I do suggest also if you're really considering a board position, that type of thing, to look up the other members of the board and the management team, see what they're up to a little bit, look on maybe their LinkedIn or something, and or meet with a couple of them and talk to them for sure, and see and make sure that it's worth your time and it's something that you and then you'll get your answer probably through doing the investigation.
When you talk about administration, kind of, so let's just say there's people listening that are new to thinking about how to give, when they're looking at some of these websites, or if they just, are looking at how the money is spent, when we talk about administration expenses versus the other things that could money be spent on. So if you have an organization, they're kind of describe like the different ways money can be used and kind of explain a little bit of like those admin expenses and why we want those to be low, or I guess ways that organizations would get them lower than maybe others that aren't.
Sure. So, it's perfectly acceptable, if it's an international organization and they have a lot of complexity, going up, maybe a little over 10% is probably fine. But you'll see some of them that are like 60, less than 60%, less than 70% spent on their actual mission. And to be fair, it's not super cut and dry, because you can put money. I mean, as we know, money management is also a little gray. You can put in reporting, you can put some money, but when you see them actually reporting something under 70%, it's kind of like, what's going on here? Um, because after a period of time, sometimes things do get a little bit bloated, and you get a lot of management, and that's where I encourage people, if you have the gift of operations or you change management, maybe some of these groups that do need you, maybe to help them, get more efficient again. And some of that's like, I mean, some of the things we're considering at Feed My Starving Children recently is, do we have to invest in some of these systems and things to make things more efficient? Because, just because we did something 10 or 15 years ago a certain way, now, but it does take a little bit of strategy and thought to get yourself to a more efficient modern platform, because otherwise it will start to cost you more money. So those are some of the things. I mean, that's all fine and good, but um, it's you can come in there and you can be the change. You can be the instigator, especially in like a church or something. They really do need a lot of that help. So yeah.
Yeah. I think that's helpful too. And it just is kind of like a good reminder for people to say, okay, if I'm looking at an organization, I can, like, yes, there's the mission, there's the program expenses of getting everything to fulfill that mission. The admin side of that is kind of, do we need to hire people to do this? Or do we have volunteers that are coming in and that uses less money than if I have to hire people to do it? So it's just interesting as people kind of start to think about, like you're saying, is my money going where I want it to go and what's it being used for? I think it's really wise to kind of look at that, especially if you're going to be giving a lot to it, to the organization. So when we kind of talk a little bit towards kind of like local community, I know there's a lot of, areas that when I kind of say you're a cheerleader, I know a lot of times, you'll kind of say, hey, there's this event going on and it's local for things that people may not know about. And so kind of share a little bit about how you think about that. So I would say personally, sometimes I'm kind of like hesitant to always post on social media. I, follow people and I pay attention, but I'm not someone who like spends a lot of time like posting things, and not for like a specific reason. So it would be helpful for me just to hear and others, what do you think through when you're like, hey, I'm going to post about this. I want people to know, like, walk me through kind of your mindset of how you think about that when you're, a cheerleader and trying to influence people for getting involved.
I really think about, when I'm pushing something out to my audience, is it going to be worth their time? Is it something that I'm familiar with? Do I think that it's going to make sense? Yeah, it's just I'm just lucky to have a following enough that I think it makes a difference if I say something, but I am selective. It's not everything that I'm asked to push out. I don't do everything because sometimes I don't know, and I do investigate, and I think people trust that your word and your opinion of something matters. So, and nothing's perfect, to be fair. I'm involved in Moms for Liberty, for example, and I really was impressed with the organization when I went to their national summit in 2022, and I wanted to connect to something more on a national level. Um, I didn't really know at the time what that meant or how deep it would be, but to get the connection and to understand with, educationally what we could do better, I thought it was important to connect nationally. And they were very professional. But don't get me wrong. I mean, there are issues, and with every organization of that size, there's going to be some issues. So you have to be understanding of that. But yeah, I'm very comfortable pushing their things out, and that people, if they go to their summit or they go to one of their sessions and in a big city, there's going to be security and it's going to be well done. And I trust that. So, that's the things I look at to evaluate what I'm going to support. And at this stage of life, I don't mind, even if the content is a little bit divisive, because we don't all agree on everything, including I mean, it could be something on taxes and money. My neighbor might think that something they want their tax to go to isn't what I do, and we might both be otherwise agreeing on everything else. We're not going to always agree. So even if it's a little divisive, if we're, to me, if it's a reasonable, I'll push it out. And I'm not worried about blowback, or I'm not worried about anymore at this stage of life. I'm fortunate that I worked very hard to get where I am, and I don't really have to worry about losing my job or anything like that. If clients choose to, they can self-select where they like to work. So, and who they like to work with. So it's fine for me.
Hmm. Well, and I think that's one of the big things, kind of the theme of where you give your time, energy, what you talk about, what you share on social media, where you're involved. And this is why I say, like, you're really going out there. Like, this is just who you are. You're like, hey, if there's something that needs my time and energy, I want to make a difference. And so I'm going to do it. There are a lot of people that there are things that could use their time or energy, but maybe they don't, they just, for some reason, they say, oh, I don't know if I have the time, or I don't know if they could use me. You won't, you don't know until you get started. And I love that you kind of shared even organizations where you said, I don't know if this is going to be one that I'm going to be involved with long term, or if this is the one, but I kind of want to be involved at this level, and let's go and try something. And so I think just kind of stepping out to see, is this something that I can get behind? I think that's what I hope people hear in this. If I want to make real change, what do I choose to get involved in and talk about? And so I guess on the flip side, when we talk about, yes, there's all these things we could be doing and that we are doing, kind of share on the flip side of that, when you're saying, hey, what are some things to avoid getting involved in, or that I don't do these things, and not necessarily, these organizations, but just kind of this mindset of, these are things that I really don't want to be involved in. I kind of want to avoid in how I think about this when I'm trying to make change.
Especially if we're talking about your time, because you can't get your time back. You can theoretically make more money. But if you are putting your time towards something that either they already have your skill set in, and I'll just name it, if it's event planning and that's your skill set, and they already knocking that out of the park, maybe you're just a participant, or maybe you're not involved because they don't need you, and then, but there probably is another organization that does need that skill set. Again, a time is such a big commodity. You cannot recover that. So, um, yeah, that's an area. I think that my eyes have been opened, especially the last 4 or 5 years, to some organizations that myself or my clients may have given to in the past have strayed from their mission a little bit. Um, and whether that can be recovered or not, unless you're on the board or in an executive management, you probably don't want to give them a lot of your money, unless you are comfortable that they're going to make the change and align with your values. Um, the program giving, you might want to take a look at periodically and see what those organizations are doing with your money. Um, so, and we all have other things in our lives. I mean, my kids are still young. I don't want to overcommit myself just from a pure time perspective. So, certain things that, you get asked to do, and we feel badly saying no, but you got to say no sometimes because your kids still need you, or, maybe you have family members that need your time too. You have to be thoughtful about where you spend your time. So that's important. And just because somebody asks you to collect something at the door, there's a lot of people that can do that, that probably do have time. And it doesn't have to be you, and people understand that. So,
Yeah, I think that is really helpful. And I think too, just to remind people that just because you get involved in something doesn't mean that you have to be involved forever. There's, a lot of these board commitments. Do you typically see where there may be like a 2 to 3 or 4 year commitment that they're typically for? Like they're usually not unending, right?
oh, definitely. I mean, just find out what the commitment is originally. And, obviously you should make every attempt to meet the commitment there, initially, but it doesn't mean it's forever. No, certainly not.
Yeah, hopefully that helps people too, just to think like, oh, if I'm getting into this, I can't get out. I've switched from things to say, okay, not this, but I really care about this right now, and they're doing fine. They don't need me, so I'm gonna switch over here. You can always go back. I think just don't feel like once you get into something, you're stuck. All right, so I want to kind of give people some ideas. So we're going to kind of break this out maybe by different phases in life or things like that. But for someone who's looking kind of to make a difference, they've said, I want to do something with my time, energy, resources. What kind of opportunities kind of should they be on the lookout for? And maybe we could say some are based on lifestyle, kind of retiree, professional, young families, kids and students. Are there different opportunities that you think about through those different life stages?
Yeah, and maybe I'll start with the younger side of things first is, when you start out and you maybe have less money, um, maybe let's call it more time because you don't have kids or a family yet, those kind of things. Giving of your time is probably what you have the most of. There's obvious exceptions, and then your skills are not as developed yet, right? So it becomes a time thing. And then as you get a little older, um, and I will also say the synergy may not matter as much in your life because you do have more time to explore, and you should when you're younger, to explore what do I like to do? What are the causes and things that give me a lot of passion? And because if you don't have passion, eventually that's going to wane, right? So you have more time to experiment, just like a job. So you're giving and your time, you have more time to experiment. And then as you get a family or, especially more busy with work, hopefully you have a better idea of where you want to give and, of your time. Maybe you have some money, maybe you don't know. But I will say, once you have kids, if you decide to have kids, I feel like the synergy of that's super important, and it makes it easy if you're doing things that are you can either do with them or it's with their friends' parents, and it kind of all fits together not more nicely. And that's probably why a lot of people get involved with things with school and locally. Doesn't have to be that way, but it also could be with work. We had definitely some things with Illinois Science and Technology Coalition. I did some mentoring there, and that worked out well with my pharmaceutical job because a lot of people were involved, and it was it just so that kind of fell in my lap as well, and it was really rewarding, and I love doing that. Um, and then as you get older, maybe you have more resources in terms of money, and you have maybe less time, maybe you still have time, just depends. Um, and then it becomes, then working with people like you to figure out how do I, optimize my financial return on this. At the same time, I am giving to the causes that I believe in. And I will also bring up something restricted gifts. The charities might not be super happy about me saying this, but it's a thing. If you do have a lot of resources and you are concerned about how that money is given out, you can talk to the organizations about making a restricted gift for a specific purpose. Sometimes they'll do it for you. Like at end of year, sometimes they have a fund for a building or something. And then you're like, okay, I want to do that this year. I have extra money, I have some losses I can offset, etc. So that then they do that for you and they make a special fund. But you can, if you have resources, you can also say, I want it used for this specific thing and maybe not something else. And that you have a little more control, but you really need to be in the six or more figure range of giving to probably make that ask. But I will bring that up because it is something that happens, and it makes sure that the organizations aren't going to use it for something that you don't support as well. So life stages, just yeah, start out exploring, just like jobs, start out exploring what you like, where your passions lie, and then over time make it synergize with your lifestyle and your busyness. And then, as you come out of that again, you might have more time, money, you can kind of, maybe expand your net again at that time.
Yeah, I think it's really helpful. And I think just important for people to kind of realize and evaluate where they're at, what tools they have, what are the things that they can give from right now versus, maybe in a few years or 10 years once kids are grown up, things like that. So I think it's helpful for people to realize that even if it's kind of not now, it's, not never, it's just maybe a different time. And then can you kind of describe different capacities that people can get involved in? So when we think about all these different organizations, we've talked about the board, being on a board, but there's a lot of different ways that people can actually get involved. Maybe share kind of a variety of those that you can think of.
Sure. I mean, it can start as volunteering to be a mentor on something. You could be on a committee, just, or even doing one single event, helping out to see how you feel about the organization. Um, a lot of these, they'll probably gladly accept your help most places. If you're thinking about dabbling in something and getting involved, just volunteer for a couple of events, meet the people before you start out. And um, and politically, same thing. I mean, it can be a not-for-profit. It could be something in politics. It could be something completely rogue and it hasn't even formulated yet. But, I'll give you an example. So we have a group that's trying to do some faith work, and there's no tax ID because there's no money being exchanged. We're using a volunteer space that doesn't charge. The women are making the food and bringing it, and everything's social media, everything's done for free. So there's no reason to have an organization per se yet, but we're all trying to get this thing going, and maybe there will be, some reasons for bank accounts and taxes and all that someday. But we're starting out small, and so you don't have to start out big on things. If you feel like what you want to work on doesn't exist, you can certainly start it out. And if there's no money involved yet and it's all volunteer, you don't have to make it complicated financially. You can start out without incorporating or anything. So
Yeah. I think that's helpful too for people to realize a lot of these things just kind of start maybe through a conversation with one other person and then you kind of bring someone else. Oh, I know this other person who would be really great and has an interest in this right now and then slowly, you kind of get people involved that have a passion for that and then that's I think how we get a lot of these organizations that are really large. A lot of times they start very small. So even if you're someone who says I have an idea of something that could be started, I'm looking for people, that have an interest in it. I guess if there's people listening that are kind of like that, where they say, I have an idea, I don't know who it is that I need. Is that something where you would kind of post on social media or just, hey, looking for, I'm just thinking like in your professional circle on LinkedIn or something, or is that something where you just maybe start a conversation with people to say, do you know anyone that's like this? How would you kind of start that?
yeah, I mean, I would start with my personal connections, bounce the idea off a couple people I trust first. It doesn't mean that they're involved or not, but just to because you may find out that that exists already or partially, and you don't want to run down a path of creating something that does exist. So do your diligence on, in a corporate sense, you call it competitive, intelligence, right? You do your competitive intelligence to see does this charity or whatever exist yet? And then, find out maybe you find a person or two that's like your beachhead who's willing to start it with you. But yeah, I mean, you could certainly use your social media. Um, yeah, I mean, and start there. It just depends on where you're at. Some people aren't too big on social media and some are, You also, you want to be careful too, because depending on what it is you're working on, um, you don't want to ask for volunteers to be a CFO when, 99.9% of them aren't going to be your CFO, So that might not be, but posting volunteers to like coordinate an event might be fine. It just depends on what you're looking for, really. Um, you know, but yeah, there's really no, no reason not to start with your connections as the first place for sure. So.
I think to kind of round out this episode, something, when we were talking about this, and kind of the whole thought behind the episode is, we talked about a lot of specifics of getting involved, how to do that, what that looks like, ways you can, but one of the things that is popular right now that people are talking about are how to set those New Year's resolutions that in a few weeks might not exist anymore. Um, and it's not to say that those aren't important, because I think what we're really talking about is, this return on our life. So the return on the investment of our resources that we've been given, and we've all been given the same amount of time. We all have maybe different levels of energy and financial resources that we can put towards these. But I guess, when we talk about this, it's much bigger than just a 1 year resolution or a 1 week. And not to say that those aren't important, because I think what we're saying is, when you think about this return on investment, it's such a big thought because it encapsulates kind of your whole life. But now when we break it down, and yes, there are things, okay, in 2025 that I need to do versus 2020, there are different things that need to happen in that year. When you kind of think about this, and maybe when you thought about like when you named your business that, kind of walk us through like how you think about this, ROI of life and the change that we're trying to bring. It's much bigger than just one meeting and one event. Can I describe that a little bit so people can kind of hear how you think about this?
Sure. So, and just like strategic planning, and your vision for a business or another entity, um, you can certainly think about that for yourself and your own life. Um, so if you can start with the end in mind, and say, okay, so when when I leave this earth, just to get deep, I mean, really, what are the things that I think I can do that have made a difference? Um, and work backwards from there. So uh, you could make, I mean, a life plan for yourself to say, what are the things that, and it doesn't mean it's not going to change. So don't be afraid to put it on paper. It can change. It's fine. Um, and evolve as you do and things around you do. But say, where can I really make this difference? And of course, most of us have something about family, those kind of things. But then I mean, really, we're talking about beyond our own family here. Think about, where my skills could be used, and what do I want to be remembered for, and where have I made a difference? And then you can build a plan backwards on that. Um, the sweet spot is the 3 to 5 years. What can I accomplish in 3 to 5 years? And if it's, yes, I want to look for some boards to be on, or I want to get some things changed in my community, or, it just depends on your focus. And and then you can work backwards to, yes, create even short-term goals from that framework. So start with the super long-term vision, mission for yourself, and what you can do with what you have, um, and work backwards from there, to create goals. And that's how I really think about it. And yes, there's some squishiness in that, because like I said, the Feed My Starving Children board fell in my lap. It wasn't like I said 10 years ago, this is a target. This is it. No, it doesn't. But I knew something like this would show up. I just didn't know what it was. So I had to be open to the opportunity of what that was that fit with, it's really for me, it's right now it's kids and education and, some money stuff just because that's what I'm good at. But, and it worked out for me. But yeah, you certainly can target some organizations and things as well. Um, the other way around can work out as well. So.
When you think, Marcia, you kind of shared a little bit, like when we talk about impact. For example, Feed My Starving Children, they used to pack how many meals, and today
Mhm.
you guys have a goal of
Mhm.
packing how many?
Yeah, so I believe, don't quote me on numbers, but back, 2019, 2020, we were like 200 something thousand. And now they're really looking towards 400, I'm not thousand, million, and 400 million or more. And there was definitely a goal put out there of 500 million. Let's see when that comes to fruition. But and the demand that the like so the way it works at Feed My Starving Children, there's a global partners network of people that bring it in country. And these people are really heroes. I mean, they're getting a lot of food into Haiti right now, and if you know what's going on there, it's a horrendous situation. And they're getting food in there, and they're one of the only organizations that is. So, but what I look at is the demand being asked for is over 500 million meals, well over that a year. And how can and for those of you that are saying, hey, I want to do something that's really sustainable, what I will tell you is that these kids are getting an education. They are able to focus, so your meals are allowing them, along with, there's other organizations. A lot of times these organizations have clothing partners and all the other things too, wraparound services. But in order to stay focused, Feed My Starving Children is on food. These kids are getting educated so that then they can bring better to their society later. So that is a sustainable mission, and I believe in it. So we want to get them to be able to feed more kids and hopefully meet the demand of their global partners as much as possible. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's pretty exciting.
I love that. I love how it's, in the beginning, or when I got started, with them, it was this, and now it's this, just to realize there is real impact, that was nothing that was like, for example, like you didn't chart that out and say, okay, when I'm on this board and it's this and this and this, that's how, it's this thought of I'm just going to get involved. And what's cool is you start to get to see the impact that's being made. And I think it is interesting, just like you said, food, into people, into bellies that normally are not getting protein or the food that it's needed. They're just, can be outcast. These, kids may not grow up, they may not live long. And so now they have life. They're able to now get an education. They're able to learn skills that, again, do get back and, used in their community. So just like you said, I think it's this thought of what's the change I want to see. And I think that's where it is a much deeper thought. So, like you said, when I leave this earth, what is it that I want to have done? And I think that's a really great place to start, because it really starts to make you think about, well, what really does matter to me? Because that is much bigger than just this year or this week, and that's really what kind of drives why we do what we do and why we get involved with what we do. So I think that's really helpful. So I guess how would you, I guess as we end this episode, what would you kind of encourage people to do as you're thinking, hey, to have this kind of return on life where you can look back and say, wow, I was able to be involved in what I wanted to and to make a difference. How would you encourage people, kind of maybe this year, or as we're just at the beginning of the year thinking about it, how would you kind of encourage them to think about it?
Yeah, and it's just about being intentional and looking at, I mean, pretty much everybody's doing something. It's,
Yeah.
it's even just, volunteering at, one of your child's activities and being a light and being encouraging to these kids in the process. There
Yeah.
isn't a time that goes by where I'll give you an example. So if I'm volunteering at the snack bar at the swim meet, these kids, you're like, oh, how'd you do on your race? And what's been going on? And you get in these conversations that are super cool, and you meet these people. It's just there's always an opportunity. You don't have to just give them the muffin and take the money. There's so much
Yeah.
more there, and meeting people, even if it's a PTO event or something, and you can make a connection. Um, and some of these kids, like, especially if they don't have a lot of mentors in their life, they love talking to parents that are interested in their success. And I think it's a lot of fun to do that. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point. Sometimes it's these easy,
Hmm.
like these just small
Hmm.
things that we don't think are a big deal.
Hmm.
your kids do swim team, and I think it's fun because every kid, it's such an individual thing, of how they're progressing. I think of this one kid, he's on swim team and his sister's, in swimming, but he's just starting out. So he's just young. And my daughter loves to look on the app to see how people did. And I noticed when she was like, oh, he won his first race, like he got his first bag tag.
Right.
So when I saw him next, I was like, did you get your first bag tag? Like,
Right.
and he just like lit up like,
Yeah.
oh, you saw, it's sometimes just these littlest things
sure.
that I think when you know something like that, what kids get excited about in that piece of, their life. I think it's like paying attention and saying, you're not sitting there saying, how can I make a difference in their life? You're just saying, hey, this is just who I am. I want to be involved. I want to encourage people. And so I think it's really cool to kind of hear how you do that, because I think it inspires others to do the same and to think about it, just kind of looking a little bit beyond ourselves to actually make a difference. So,
Yeah. And most of them aren't going to be Olympic swimmers, but they can carry this onto their life and, be encouraged in a different area. And they've developed the discipline and the leadership on a sport or something else, an activity, it pays such big dividends for them later in different areas. So it's good.
Yeah. No, I think this has been really good. Thank you so much for joining us to kind of share how you think about this. Thank you for all your involvement and encouragement to people to do that. I know it really helps people probably get involved that wouldn't otherwise, or hear about things that they wouldn't otherwise. So keep doing what you're doing. And hopefully we'll encourage other people to do the same.
Also, and I love that you do these podcasts, Michelle. These are phenomenal and really interesting for me as well.
Thank you. I'm glad you could join us. So, all right. Well, with that, our episode comes to a close. Thank you, Marsha, for sharing your story and perspective with us. Any companies or links that we've referenced in this episode can be found in the show notes, which we'll post on our website, financialdesignstudio.com. And thank you for listening. We post new episodes every other week. You can subscribe to our podcast or follow us on social media so that you never miss a conversation. And we'll talk to you in our next episode.
Thanks for listening. To find any links or resources related to this episode, check out our show notes. Your host was Michelle Smallenberger, a certified financial planner and CEO. The guests featured are from Financial Design Studio, a team of experienced fiduciary, fee-only advisors based in Chicago. Anna Lewis is the executive producer of the Behind the Designs podcast. And as always, for more information about Financial Design Studio and who we are, check out our website, financialdesignstudio.com. And final note, no content discussed on this podcast should be taken as financial advice. Financial Design Studio accepts no responsibility for your individual choices. We'll see you in the next episode.